The first thing Jedediah Jed Stone saw was not blood, it was humiliation. A young woman lay contorted on the sun-baked grass near the Smoky Hill River. Her wrists were bound tightly, her ankles pulled back, her torn white garment clinging to her skin as if it had lost the strength to shield her. The Kansas heat pressed down on her bare legs, the wind lifting the material just enough to steal what little dignity she had left. Her face was flushed, not only from pain but from disgrace so profound it made breathing seem like hard work. Jed froze where he stood. 48 years on the plains had shown him death, starvation, and man wrecked by cattle and bullets, but this was a different situation. This was a woman left alive on purpose, positioned like a warning, abandoned in daylight where anyone could see her. She saw him then. Her eyes grew wide with fear, then squeezed shut as if the world itself had become too unbearable. Her voice came out broken and trembling. "Don't look there." The words were weak, embarrassed, and pleading, not a shout for help, but an appeal for kindness. Jed felt his chest tighten. He did not know where to look, so he looked nowhere at all. He stared at the skyline, jaw clenched, hands shaking like a boy caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The woman shifted slightly, the ropes biting into her skin, and the movement made her gasp. It was clear now she had been stripped of more than her possessions. Whatever plain clothing she once wore underneath had been taken, leaving her exposed in a way no respectable person would ever choose. Jed pulled the covering from his saddle and tossed it toward her without looking back. "Don't move," he said softly. His voice cracked beside himself. The covering landed over her legs. She let out a breath that sounded like relief mixed with weeping. Dust stuck to her cheeks, and tears cut light lines through the dirt on her face. She tried to curl up, but the rope stopped her short. The stillness between them was heavy. Only the sound of grasshoppers and the distant stamping of Jed's horse filled the air. This was not an accident, and no storm had done this, no wild animal. Someone had taken their time, someone and intended for her to be found exactly like this. As Jed finally knelt to cut the ropes at her ankles, her voice quivered again. "Please don't look." He nodded, though she could not see it. But in that moment, with the heat beaten down in the open land, watching in silence, one thought struck him harder than any bullet. If she was left here alive, ashamed and terrified, then what kind of man was meant to find her, and what was supposed to happen next if he did? So here's the question that changes everything. Was she only a victim left behind, or was she the start of something far more hazardous meant for him? Jed kept his eyes on the skyline like it was the only decent thing left to stare at. He slid his blade out slowly, not to frighten her, just to get the job completed. His voice stayed low. "Ma'am, I'm going to cut the ropes. I won't look, I promise." She swallowed hard under the covering. "I didn't mean for anyone to see me like this," she said, and then she let out a breath that sounded like a hurting laugh. "I guess that opportunity's gone." She tried to joke, but her voice shook like humor was the only way she could keep from falling apart. Jed grunted once. "Be quiet." "Yeah, well, I've had worse mornings, but not by much." He reached behind him and grabbed his water bottle, canteen, still facing away, and held it out like a man offering truce. "Take a drink, small one. Don't choke." Her hand trembled as it found the water bottle. She drank, then coughed, then gave a tiny, annoyed sigh. "Warm as bathwater," she muttered. "Welcome to Kansas," Jed said. "It does that in summer." That little bit of normal talk did something important. It made her feel human again, not just a poor creature left on the grass. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders dropped a bit. The covering stayed tight around her like it was the last good thing in the world. "I'm Willow," she said. "Most people call me Will." "Jedediah," he answered. "Friends call me Jed. You can call me whatever helps you through the next 5 minutes." She almost laughed again, then winced. The ropes had dug deep and the skin around her wrists looked raw and swollen. Jed felt that old ranch anger rise in him, the kind that starts in your stomach and climbs to your throat. Somebody did this intentionally. Somebody tied those knots like they had time and like they enjoyed it. Will spoke like she detested every word. They took my bag, my shoes, and what little modesty I had left just to be cruel. Jed's jaw tightened. He still did not look. He reached back, found a second strip of cloth from his saddle roll, and slid it toward her. Wrap that around yourself. There's no honor in the wind getting a better view than it deserves. Will pulled the cloth around herself, and for a second she sounded almost like a regular young woman. If you tell anyone you saw me like this, I'll haunt your barn. I'll rattle every bucket you own. Jed huffed. Ma'am, if you can haunt, you don't need my help, but I'd appreciate you haunting the men who did this first. She went quiet again. Then she whispered, I was headed for Abilene, the depot. I work there sometimes. They said I heard something I shouldn't. Jed's eyes narrowed. Abilene wasn't just cattle and whiskey. It was gossip, money, and men who smiled while they stole. He shifted his weight and finally lowered himself to one knee, still looking away, still careful. All right, Will. I'm going to cut the knot at your ankles, and then we get you out of the sun. Will's voice jumped sharp with panic and embarrassment. Don't look there. Jed turned his face even farther away, and right then something snapped through the air. The dirt beside his knee exploded like a fist hit the ground. Who just shot at him? Jed didn't answer the question out loud. He just reacted. He grabbed a handful of grass and yanked himself sideways. Then he reached back and pulled Will down flat behind him, covering and all. Will let out a sharp little squeak like a startled rabbit, then clamped her mouth shut. Another crack popped from somewhere up on the rise. A second puff of dust jumped a few feet away, close enough that Jed felt grit hit his cheek. Stay low, he whispered, like you're a fence post. Fence posts don't get shot at most days. Will's voice came out tiny. I was hoping my day would conclude before the shooting part. Me too, Jed muttered, but Kansas don't always ask what you're hoping. He kept his eyes down, but he listened intently. He heard a faint shuffle in the grass, the way sound travels when the air is hot and dry. He also caught the thin smell of burned gunpowder drifting on the wind. That told him the shooter wasn't a mile off. They were close enough to feel brave. Jed slid his blade into his palm, then felt around under the covering until he found Will's bound ankles. He still didn't look. He cut the rope with 2 quick pulls, then pressed the knife handle into her hand. Hold it. Don't wave it around. Just hold it like it's the last piece of sense you've got. Will's fingers closed on it, shaking. I've never stabbed anyone, she whispered. Good. Let's keep your record clean today. He crawled slow and steady. Using the slight dip in the ground, he tugged Will with him inch by inch, like pulling a sack of feed across a barn floor. It wasn't elegant. It was survival. When they reached a patch of taller grass near the creek bank, Jed finally risked a glance uphill. He didn't see a man, but he saw what mattered. A wisp of smoke, thin as a thread, and a quick flash of metal off sunlight. Then nothing. Someone's up there, he murmured. And they're patient. They left me out there. They wanted you to find me. That landed heavy. Jed felt the anger rise again, hotter than the summer sun. A grown man could handle the disagreement, but using a young woman like a snare, that was low, even for frontier scum. He leaned close to Will, keeping his voice calm. Listen, we're going to move along the creek bed. It's messy, but it's lower. We get to my line shack, then we talk, and you tell me everything you heard at that depot. Will nodded, eyes wide. Okay, but Jed, there's one more thing. He paused. What thing? She stared past him toward the rise, and her voice turned shaky. I saw him before, not today, not out on the prairie. I saw him around your property. If you're still with me, do me a favor. Tap subscribe real quick so you don't miss how this turns out. And go ahead and sip your tea or coffee. Get comfortable. Then tell me what time it is for you right now and where you're listening from. Jed didn't ask her to say the name out loud. He didn't need to. The look on Will's face told him enough. It was the look folks get when they know danger, not from talk, but from memory. Someone she had seen before, someone who smiled at him in daylight. They moved along the creek bed, slow and low, water soaking Jed's boots and cooling the dust on their skin. Jed reached back and slipped the reins off his horse. He gave the gelding one sharp pat and sent him trotting hard toward home. If that horse hit the stone corral alone, the old hands would know something was wrong. Will kept the covering tight, teeth clenched, doing her best not to tremble, wet and upset from shock. Every sound felt louder down there. Frogs, insects, the soft scrape of boots on mud. Jed disliked that feeling. It meant eyes were watching. When they reached the line shack, Jed waved her inside first. It wasn't anything special. 4 walls, a crooked door, and a smell of old hay and sweat. But it was shade, and shade meant breathing room. He secured the door and finally turned his back fully to her. "There's a clean shirt on that peg," he said. "Put it on. Take your time." Will did not answer right away. Then he heard fabric move, followed by a shaky breath that sounded almost like relief. "Thank you," she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just genuine. Jed sat on an upturned crate and wiped his face. "All right," he said. "Now tell me what you meant back there." Will's voice came steadier now that the door was shut. "I work the depot desk some afternoons. I file papers. I listen more than I talk. Men forget a woman is in the room when they think she doesn't matter." Jed nodded. That part he understood well. "I heard names," she continued. "Schedules, livestock numbers. One man kept saying your ranch was in the way, said you were stubborn, said you wouldn't sell." Jed felt his stomach tighten. "Who said it?" Will hesitated. Then she said, "The man giving orders. He wore the same brand as your hands, the Flying S." Jed didn't move, but his face changed like a door inside him just shut. The name hit like a kick to the ribs. Dale Cooper. Dale had eaten at his table, ridden his fences, shaken his hand every morning like a man with nothing to hide. Jed stood slowly. "That don't make sense," he said, though part of him already knew it did. "Dale knows this land. He knows me." Will swallowed. "That's why he's dangerous," she said. "He knew you'd come looking. He knew where you'd kneel." Outside, a horse snorted, then another. Boots shifted on dry ground. Not rushed, not loud. Men who believed they were in control. Jed reached for his rifle and checked the chamber. His face was calm now, the way it got before a storm. "Looks like Dale brought company," he said. Will stepped closer, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. "Jed," she whispered, "he didn't want your land, Jed. He wanted to watch you fall apart." So here's the question that hangs in the air. When the door opens, will Jed face a hired gun or the man he trusted most in the world? The door did not open all at once. It creaked slowly, like the shack itself didn't want to be part of what was coming. A voice came through first, calm and known. "Jed, come on out. No need for this." It was Dale Cooper, the same voice Jed had heard 100 times at sunrise, the kind of voice you trust without thinking, because it sounds like work and coffee and routine. Jed stood near the wall, rifle held low, not pointed yet. Will stayed behind him, wrapped tight, holding herself together with pure strength. Jed spoke back steady. "Dale, why are you here?" A pause, then a soft chuckle. "Because you're a good man, and good men don't know when to step aside." That sentence did something strange. It didn't just make Jed angry. It made him sad, because it told him Dale had been watching his decency like it was a weakness. Jed opened the door a hand width, enough to see, not enough to invite trouble. Dale stood outside with 2 riders behind him, guns resting easy like they owned the afternoon. Dale's eyes went past Jed, searching for Will. When he saw the covering, he smiled like a man pleased. His bait still had a hook in it. He'd seen that same torn white dress at the depot, and now he knew she hadn't died out there. Jed's voice dropped. "You did that to her?" Dale shrugged. "She listened where she shouldn't. You found her like I knew you would." Jed's voice stayed flat. "I built this place with my own 2 hands, Dale. You want it, you'll have to bury me on it." Will made a small sound, half fear, half disgust. Jed lifted one hand behind him, a quiet signal for her to stay still. Then he looked at Dale and said something he didn't even know he had in him. No. Just one word, but it landed like a hammer. Dale's smile faded. You sure about that? Jed nodded. I'm sure because a man who trades people like cattle ain't a man. He's just a problem that's gone too long. In that moment, Will understood something, and maybe you did too. Courage isn't loud. It doesn't always ride in with music. Sometimes it's a tired rancher in a crooked shack choosing to protect a stranger because it's the right thing. Dale's rider shifted. Hands drifted closer to leather. The air went tight. Then a horse screamed outside and boots hit the dirt fast. Old ranch hands, men Jed had worked beside for 20 years. One of them yelled, "Jed's gelding came home alone. Where's Jed?" Another voice followed, rough and steady. "Everybody drop your guns right now. Dale, I branded calves with you 20 years ago. Don't make me shoot a man I once called friend." A moment later, the town marshal pushed in behind them, breathing hard like he'd been riding mean and fast. He took one look at Dale and his eyes went flat. Not heroes from a dime novel, just locals with steady eyes who'd decided they weren't going to let cruelty run their county. Dale's rider shifted. Hands drifted closer to leather. The air went tight. Then a horse screamed outside and boots hit the dirt fast. Old ranch hands, men Jed had worked beside for 20 years. One of them yelled, "Jed's gelding came home alone. Where's Jed?" Another voice followed, rough and steady. "Everybody drop your guns right now. Dale, I branded calves with you 20 years ago. Don't make me shoot a man I once called friend." A moment later, the town marshal pushed in behind them, breathing hard like he'd been riding mean and fast. He took one look at Dale and his eyes went flat. Not heroes from a dime novel, just locals with steady eyes who'd decided they weren't going to let cruelty run their county. Dale froze. For the first time, the man who thought he owned the game realized he was standing in the open. Dale was taken in, Will was safe, and Jed sat on that crate after it was over, shaking a little, not from fear, but from the weight of what could have happened. Will looked at him and whispered, "You didn't have to." Jed answered, "Yeah, I did. That's the whole point." He looked out past the door where the late sun was sinking behind the low hills. Some things are worth standing for, even when your knees shake. Here's the lesson that stays. The world will test you. It will try to teach you that looking away is easier, but every time you choose decency, you pull the world back from the edge a little. So let me ask you, if you were Jed, would you have opened that door? And if you were Will, would you still believe people can be good after what she went through? If this story gave you something to think about, tap like and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Jed's place?